Hi, my name is Greg Chambers, and today's warm and fuzzy topic in our lead, the latest in our lead generation series, is about press releases. So PR sometimes gets like it's press releases, it's public relations light maybe is what this webinar will be about, but basically it's about getting the word out is what we're going to be talking about, and how it is that we at GoLeads have done it, and at Lead Gen Compass how we're doing the same thing so that you can apply the same process yourself. Make sure I'm going on here. So today, the big goal is we're going to talk about getting out in front of our audience, right? We'll talk about the increasing visibility in front of that target. We'll talk about building your own distribution tool, how to measure effectiveness. So I always think I put my little note here was measures for the CFO. Anybody who's questioning whether or not this is working, a way that we can talk about that, so we can say this is what the investment is and this is what we can see happening, the leading indicators. And then we'll talk about getting published, getting some actual press. So we'll wrap that up at that point. And if there's anything that you were hoping that we covered today, the chat box is always open. And there's also a Q&A section in your Zoom tool, somewhere in there. I'm not exactly sure where it's at. But if you have anything, pop it in there. Nui is monitoring it for me, and I will check it from time to time. But let's kind of talk about what media looks like today, and where we fit in as we're going to do this. So we're going to kind of frame out this, what we're going to talk about inside this webinar. So right now, I wish I could remember who it was that gave me this, but the current media landscape we can break it into 3 parts pretty easily: earned, owned, and paid. And earned is what we're talking about here, right? This is when we think about public relations, we think about press releases, we think about getting people to mention us, getting people to share our information, getting people to review us, tell stories about us. But that's all. We say it's earned because it's nothing that we can force anybody to do. The stories need to be newsworthy enough for them to share, for anybody to share it with us, and especially to share it with our target audience. What's a lot easier for us is, especially new to us right now, is the owned, right? This is all the stuff that we're building currently. This is what the internet has given us. We are all publishing now, right? So on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. The dogs can have websites, mobile sites, social media sites. We can get out there. And then if you're willing to invest, there are platforms that we can invest in. Pay-per-click advertising. We can do retargeting off of traffic that ends up on our website. We can purchase display ads. All those things should work together. So let's talk about where we're talking about right now. We're talking about this middle spot, getting them all to work together. This would be perfect, leveraging all 3 areas to increase the awareness in your target market. Because whenever I see a Venn diagram like this, I always think of the imbalance, right? If you are all earned and paid, that little section in between earned and paid, but you don't have any owned media, you've probably built on another platform, right? So this is like, I think of YouTube superstars, Facebook, Instagram, these people that are building on a platform. Amazon, anybody who's used Amazon as their as their seller channel. The only problem with that is that you don't own it, right? And that can be an issue because you don't have any control. Any changes they make could be changes that affect you. If you are in that owned and paid section, which is where a lot of us play, at least you're in control of those things. But the problem is that you're not very buzzy, right? Nobody's talking about you. You have no earned media. And if you're in the owned and earned, that enviable owned and earned stage, we can say that we'd like to do more paid advertising because we just want to extend our reach. So we'd like for all of those to work together. We don't want to be out of balance in any of them. And the reason is because we believe in this rule of 30, which if you have heard me say this before, if you want to get your message out, whatever your message is, the research shows it's 10 exposures to that message before it sinks in. And we know that everything's busy enough that you'll be lucky to get 1/3 of your exposures to go through and actually hit its mark. So that's why we say the rule of 30. We're always trying to increase that number of impressions. So as we talk about our press release webinar today, this is why this is what we're talking about, is helping with that rule of 30. So why is this important at all? Because we work with people. We've tried these ourselves where we use a lot of these press releases. Somebody says, oh, you know what we need to do is we should probably just put a press release together and then stick it out on the Newswire. And then that's how we'll get our earned media. The challenge is that this whole earned media piece is really opaque, right? It's really tricky. Nobody, I would challenge anybody who's a super cost-effective way to get a lot of earned media. It's not as easy as it looks. So we get a lot of these. I did a few press releases, Greg, and nothing happened comments. And at $200, $300 per press release, even if you buy groups of them, that can add up fast. Plus the results are kind of hard to measure. So that equals frustration. So this is why we're going through this webinar. We're going to help try to alleviate some of this frustration. So let's talk about press releases for just a second. So we've kind of described the media landscape, and I hope that that's clear. And then now let's dig into press releases, the things that we're sending into the earned media space. So one, the most common is an announcement, right? So we have a business, like in this case, I pulled these this morning, we're the Pasadena Tournament of Roses, and we've decided on our opening spectacular and the float participants and the parade lineup. It's an item of interest, and we hope it's interesting enough that the press talks about us. That's one type of announcement, and that's generally what we see a lot of our clients pushing out and then kind of complaining about. We'll talk about where we think the best use of that is. Another one is a story pitch, right? So you're trying to put yourself into a story and hope that that gets picked up. So in this case, Open Table, the restaurant reservation service, is saying there's 100 best restaurants in America for 2018, and this is what we say. Or Lending Tree, the mortgage company, says what we're finding is everybody's moving down south, right? So they're kind of painting a story. They're saying this is a trend that's out there, and we're going to insert ourselves in it. In this case, we're going to provide the information. Sometimes they might be like, if I was a restaurant, I may say, oh, I'm in Open Table's 100 best restaurants, right? So in that way, I'm kind of borrowing on that. And then the last type we see is opinion pieces, where somebody is commenting on news that is going on and they are inserting themselves into the earned media space that way. So in this case, President George H.W. Bush passes away, and the United Spinal Association reflects on the leadership of President George H.W. Bush. So they put themselves out there. So those are the three different kinds. Let's kind of dig a little bit more into them. This standard announcement is really great for, like, I love these for local business journals, newspapers. If you get new hires, you're sticking it, you let people know what's going on, and it's important in the business. New hires always get picked up because local press is interested in local people, right? So it's good for that. And if you stick it out on one of those news wires that we had looked at before, every once in a while, you can get logos, right? So it's, say you get the story, Forbes might subscribe to one of these services, and they literally print every single one of the news releases on a page inside their website, somewhere deep inside their website. This is where you see people say, oh, as seen in Forbes. And then you go look for Forbes and their name, and you can't find them anywhere. Chances are it was a press release that was out there. The way to distinguish these is if you're talking about your company, right? It's very company focused. If you're talking about yourself, that is a traditional type of an announcement. You're just hoping that you're interesting enough to get picked up on. And I would say if you're Apple, GE, right, Amazon, Starbucks, a giant company, you are press worthy. You just need to put, any press release you put out there is probably going to pick up, and some stories are going to get told. But we're the little guys, so we might have to work a little harder like this. We might need to do a story pitch. So we might need to spot a trend and then report on it, but then put ourselves in as part of that trend. So if there was something about list companies, GoLeads could stick themselves in that story, and then that might help a reporter who is looking for a scoop, a story. They might come across a story pitch like this and say, oh, I can kind of format this into a story. So this is, as opposed to thinking about the company, thinking about ourselves, our company, and then putting ourselves out there as the subject of the story, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, reporters, here's this thing you may not have noticed. And by the way, we're part of it, right? So maybe that's a way that we can get a story going. And then the last type of news release that we see is there's some news event that's going on and we insert ourselves into it. So newsjacking, I don't know if you have bumped into the name David Meerman Scott. He wrote a book about it a few years ago called Newsjacking. And in there, he's basically saying this, that there is the life cycle of a news story, right? So if you look, right, interest is on the y-axis and time goes along the x-axis. And so when breaking news happens, there's little interest, but then the public excitement grows. And he's saying, if you can insert yourself right after breaking news and journalists are looking for more information, that's how you can insert yourself into the story. So people who are looking for more stories about President George H.W. Bush, we got to fill up this 24-hour news cycle, may bump into what the United Spinal Association says. And now the United Spinal Association gets some free press, and hopefully it's in front of their market. We try to use all three of these. The reason we break them into three parts is because we expect different results from each one. If we're trying to influence opinion and be part of the story, we have different expectations than if we're just trying to announce something about our company. Okay, so that's the layout of the marketplace, and then the types of tools that we're talking about for this webinar and getting yourself out so that you can get some earned media. Let's talk about the best way to set goals and good goals. And the easiest way is the same way that Stephen Covey had pointed out years and years ago. Begin with the end in mind, right? Let's just start with it. We say, hey, it's January of 2020. What is a win at that point? If we were doing a little bit of a earned media attempt, and what does a win look like, and how exactly can we define it? Can we quantify it? Can we qualify? It's going to go up or down, like once we've talked about the future, the idealized future, that's the upside. Can we talk about the downside? Like what would the worst case scenario be? And can we paint some scenarios in between? And then we work backwards to January 2019. So once we have an idea of like, this is where we're at. So for instance, if I am a company that has never gotten any earned media, the idealized future does have me like, gosh, if I can just get a few press releases, to be picked up, if I can get quoted in an article, if I can maybe even submit an article to a journal and start to get published, that becomes the idealized future, right? And then we can work backwards. So let's talk about how this all works together, right? When I say that we're working up and down, what the future looks like, what we're trying to identify is that evidence, right? What would the hard evidence be that things are working? What would the anecdotal evidence be? The it's not super measurable, but you know what? It just feels busier type evidence. And is there any third-party evidence that I can be looking for? In general, with analytics and some of the other tools that we have on our websites, we can look for things like impressions, right? Target audience impressions. If we can define the audience and we can kind of figure out where they're at online somewhere, we can see how many times that audience maybe got exposed to us. I'm thinking now of Facebook and maybe some of the tools that they have to help us show how many times our ad showed up there, or something that we're promoting, like a press release. How many times did that show up there? We could put our company name into a Google AdWords search. So we're going to pay Google to run an ad on ourselves. And not that we're looking to spend money for people who are searching for us, but it is probably the most accurate way to determine how many times people search for variations of your name or your people's names. And so to me, that just becomes an investment into, I'm just trying to find an indicator of how well all this stuff is working. And then there's like hard evidence, right? Other hard evidence like mentions, articles, interviews, podcasts, etc. So let me give you an example. This would be a consultant that we were working with. And so they budgeted $2,100 for this part of the project. And then the question that they need to ask themselves, that she was asking herself, is what is the best case scenario. So in this case, she wants earned media, and actually she's just paid media and owned media all to work together and as part of this investment, because a new client at her average rate of $7,500 pays for everything. Now, what could she live with? She could live with having some articles accepted, maybe being quoted in a few mentions. And then I say, well, how many articles are you talking about? Like, is it a dozen articles you need to be in? Is it just one? And we came up with 4. We came up with 6 mentions. So trying to get into 6 stories where she gets quoted as an expert. And then we could leverage all those things. This is really more me. I was looking at this. We can leverage everything for impressions and hopefully get some, at least an inquiry into what is the work that you do and how can we do this? And then the last piece, right, the bad, if we're saying that this is the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the ugly piece of it, is for that investment, she would say that this is not working if there was 0 articles, 0 mentions, and there just wasn't any evidence that it was helping at all. But when it comes to, the reason I put this under good budgeting is because when it comes to talking to your CFO who says, hey, $2,100, what, you had high hopes, what's happening? Being able to describe it in these, well, we have 0 articles, we have 0 mentions, but we somehow magically right afterwards, we got 2 new clients. So, dollar-wise, it's successful, but, it's not exactly what we were expecting for activity. Some of our leading indicators weren't there. Right, it gives us a basis for a discussion because we were trying to predict the future, and then now our CFO is very interested in how close did your predictions come to being true. So that is that's the groundwork, right? So hopefully this is making sense to you what we're talking about. We're talking about where we fit in this mediascape, which is we're after the earned media because it's kind of like I mean, that's word of mouth, right? That's people talking about us. That's what we're after. We've got a few different tools that we're going to talk about going forward, which is the 3 different types of press releases, and then a way that we would be able to measure it and build a budget around it. Am I saying $2,100 is a good budget? No, it all depends, right? It depends is always a great answer because it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how much money you have to invest in it. So this is where now we're going to get into, this is how we do it. And the first question we ask when we're talking about helping you distribute these tools, these press releases, so that you can get into some earned media, the first question we're going to ask is, where are your people, right? How would we find them in LinkedIn? How would we find them in Facebook? Do you have any newsletter lists? Do you have website visitors? Because we're trying to build some distribution lists of customers, of target customers, and of press. If we're trying to eventually get the press to talk about us, we would like to at least have some people in our lists where we can identify them and say, hey, these are the people where when I have the most press worthy information, that's where I'm targeting. Your people, when I think of them, I always think of MailChimp. So for example, if we're going to put this in to newsletter lists, if we have a newsletter from MailChimp, right? So we've got 1,000 names in our newsletter. Have we hooked that up to LinkedIn and their matched audiences? Have we hooked that up to Facebook and their matched audiences? Have we hooked them up to Google? That's who you should, like, these are the people that right? They should, if you're doing any sort of press release activity, they're probably the most likely to tell stories about you. So be in front of them, right? That's step 1. Step 2 is, let's define that market that we want to hit. So if you did the customer profiling webinar, we gave you a scoring form that was in there, like a prospect scoring form, something like that, where you could define, like, these are the ideal people that we're trying to talk to. These are kind of my A prospects, B prospects, and C prospects. Harvest your internal list, right? Dig through current contacts, dig through old contacts, and look for third-party lists. So third-party lists, obviously, I think is GoLeads. That's what we do. We have access to a business database, a consumer database, an email database, and then there's a whole bunch of other databases that we've been in the list business for 20 years. So we can usually find, if you can help us with what the definition is, if you can harvest your internal lists and help us break those into A, Bs, and Cs, we can help you find even more of them. And yeah, in the end, my last instruction is be a hoarder. This is the time, this is the one time where we'll let you be a hoarder. Don't discard, don't let your people discard what they consider bad leads because they aren't purchasing today. Don't let them discard it so fast. We just want to get permission to get in touch and stay in touch. We've got to be in this for a long time, right? Think fourth sale first is always the mantra of the gentleman named Alan Weiss. And it's just good advice. Like, take the long-term view of the whole project. And the last piece, right? So if this is the people that you want to know, right? So the first list is all the people that know you. Let's get a distribution list of them. Then let's get a distribution list of the people that you would like to know and would like to get in front of. And the last is, where do you find these press people? And so I usually just find them by people who've written stories about around the market that we're trying to perform in, right? So in this case, this is an Inc. article about a young company that got purchased, but it's by Tom Foster. And then you can click on Tom Foster and you can find who Tom Foster is. And then you can start trying to start a conversation with him to find what he deems as newsworthy, to give him information that you think is newsworthy. So I would not be sending Tom Foster items about, this is just what my company does, because in the end, he probably doesn't care that much. But I would send him stories or press releases about, these are some trends that are happening in the marketplace, or this is my opinion of a trend that is happening in a marketplace, and you should work with me. So this advice I grabbed off of this article, and it'll be in the recording deck that you get, but it's how to successfully pitch the New York Times, or, well, anyone else's way says. But it is good, right? It's with these notes, you always want to be concise. You want to explain, give them the why this is important, why anybody cares, and then you want to prove that you're the person who could actually help them do the work if they need help getting things done. Because it's one thing to get the story of 100 best restaurants. It's another thing to have, like, right, most reporters, right, they go looking for more information so that they can fill out these stories. They're not just going to reprint your press release because a robot could do that. They want to add their own touch, and that's why we read them. So when they go looking for color to add to their stories, this is where we can get press mentions. So the two services that we use here, one is Help a Reporter Out, HARO. It comes out 3 times a day, and the only thing I'll say is it's free. So there's a ton of work involved in it because you got to sort through everything, and there's a lot of outlets that are not necessarily, it's not Time Magazine or the Wall Street Journal that usually shows up in there, even though they show up in there every once in a while. So that's why I say it's a lot of work, because you're kind of like a TSA agent. You got to sort through a lot of stuff just so you can find the one dangerous thing that's in there. But PR Leads is a service for $100 a month where I found the publications to be much better. So the Wall Street Journal reporters do show up in there more often. Barron's, Inc. magazine, a few of those show up in there. And when you're communicating with these people, the way that you do it is just like that article said. It's just quick. Like in this case, this ProfNet is what the PR Leads notes end up showing up as, or at least they did last year. And it says small business hiring trends for 2017. This is a really simple, it's bullet point. The who I am is exactly the same on every single one of these responses. My contact info, the third bullet point, and my examples of the work that I've done, those are all pre-bulleted. All I'm really giving them is 1 to 2 points based on what it is that they're asking for. So in this case, I think I just gave 1 point about what small business clients are looking for when they're doing their hiring to get press releases. And I gotta tell you, it works, but it's not, you don't get 100% response, right? Nobody has a 100% hit rate, but it's, if you can get in the habit where it doesn't take much time to respond to these, you can check them every other day, every day, and then respond pretty quickly so you can climb on the trends. The process for getting your own articles, for getting like articles inside of journals, or maybe even an op-ed piece inside of the New York Times or anywhere else, is about the same, right? Going back to that, I forget where that article came from, Neiman Labs, but his advice is good, right? But it's the same thing. So when we were pitching stories to Accounting Today, we were just saying these things. Here's my idea. Here's what your readers are going to get, right? Because it's about your readers. Here's when it can be written and when you can go out. And then here's evidence that I've done this before. So if you say yes, I know how to do it so that I can write an article. And then I really can say, hey, I have articles that have appeared in accountingtoday.com, right? So let's kind of wrap up what I've rolled through in this webinar. This is a process, right? Not an event. So start with the end in mind. If you want to get more earned media, you have to define what it is that earned media is going to look like. Then take the time to segment your audiences, have a point of view for where you're going to be distributing your information, and focus on their end. I say the end consumer, but it's really their end consumer. If I'm trying to do something in the Denver market and I'm trying to do a press release on a book, this book that we wrote, for instance, and we were trying to push it out, I would try to define, I would say this is a good book for small businesses, and it's a good, like in Denver, there are, 85% of the market is under 10 employees. And so that's why it would be important to you, Denver Post, as a for instance. And so putting myself in that trend and saying that this is why it's important because it's all focused on their consumer. But the big piece on all of this is even if you don't invest anything but your own time, or if you hire somebody to do this for you, the trick is don't keep yourself a secret and believe that it is a process. It's not an event. You're not going to just be able to turn it on randomly. So that's all I have. I don't know if there's questions at this point, but if there are, I'm checking the Zoom webinar chat and there's no questions. So let's talk about some of the things that we can offer to you. And then if you have questions, that'll give you time to type. The Human Beings Guide to Business Growth is a book full of ideas for how to get your company, especially if you're a company with under 250 employees, how to get everybody involved in generating some new business. The Perfect Growth Formula is a great book for getting sales and marketing on the same page. And you can see, hey, look, there's a little Venn diagram, the same as we used before. And if you're looking for outsourced help to get this done, Lead Gen Compass is our new program. It's going well, and heading into 2019, it's going to be officially official, no longer in beta or whatever mode it's in. And if you have questions, you can contact any of us at GoLeads.com, LeadGenCompass.com, the phone number 402-334-1824, or send us an email, info@GoLeads.com. And it looks like we're all set. The holiday season is upon us. I hope you can fit this in. And if you need help in 2019, we are here to help. Thank you for your time. This has been Greg Chambers, GoLeads.com, LeadGenCompass.com, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.